In the aftermath of the great battle, King Dhritarashtra sat in his palace overcome with grief and anxiety. His son Duryodhana had been consumed by a desire for power and revenge against his cousins, the Pandavas. The news of Bhishma's fall had sent shockwaves throughout the kingdom, and Dhritarashtra was beside himself with worry as he sat in his throne room, surrounded by his advisors, and noble Sanjaya, his trusted counselor, entered the room. His eyes were red from crying, and his heart was heavy with sorrow. Dhritarashtra looked up at him and asked Sanjaya, "What did my sons do after Bhishma's fall? How did they reach to this devastating news?" Sanjaya took a deep breath before beginning his tale. He spoke of how the Kauravas had been filled with anxiety and grief, their minds consumed by thoughts of defeat and despair. They had wept for Bhishma, their revered leader, and had attempted to come to terms with the loss of Sanjaya. Continued to speak. Dhritarashtra's eyes grew wetter with concern. He asked Sanjaya to tell him more about what his sons had done after Bhishma's fall. Sanjaya recounted how they had reflected on their duties as Kshatriyas and had decided to honor Bhishma by creating a bed for him with straight chefs. The Kauravas had then bid farewell to Bhishma, walking around him in a show of respect. Before departing once more into battle, the divisions of the army clashed, and the sound of trumpets and drums filled the air as the two forces met on the battlefields. Sanjaya's words painted a vivid picture of the chaos and destruction that answered after Bhishma's fall. Dhritarashtra listened with growing unease as he heard of how his sons had been afflicted by fate, their hearts heavy with grief and anger. Sanjaya spoke of Karna, the mighty armed hero who was equal to Devavrata himself. A glimmer of hope appeared in Dhritarashtra's eyes. He remembered how Karna had vowed not to fight as long as Bhishma lived, but would join the battle if he were killed. Sanjaya continued his tale, recounting how the Kauravas had cried out for Karna, urging him to come and save them from their predicament. Dhritarashtra listened intently, his heart filled with a mix of emotions, hope, fear, and anxiety. As Sanjaya finished speaking, Dhritarashtra sighed like a snake, his body shaking with emotion. He looked at Sanjaya and asked, "Is it true that the hearts of all my sons are turned towards Karna? Do they see him as their savior?" Sanjaya nodded in response, and Dhritarashtra's the sun was setting over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the carnage. Sanjaya stood by King Dhritarashtra's side, recounting the events that had unfolded since Bhishma's fall. As Sanjaya spoke at higher, the sun, Karna rode onto the field, his chariot wheels splashing through the shallow waters of the Ganges. His eyes were filled with tears as he beheld the devastation around him. That mighty Kaur warrior and foremost of men, Bhishma, had been slain by the foe. Karna's heart etched at the thought of his fallen comrade with a heavy heart. Karna addressed the soldiers. Bhishma, that grender of foes, that slayer of hostile heroes, was like a celestial being on earth. His virtues shone brighter than the moon's luminescence. Alas, when he has received his quietus, I regard all other heroes as already slain. Karna's words were laced with sorrow and reverence for the fallen warriors. Sanjaya continued to narrate. Karna began to console the Dhritarashtras, trying to ease their grief, but his efforts only seemed to intensify their wailing and weeping. The sound of their lamentations echoed across the battlefield, a poignant reminder of the devastating loss they had suffered. However, as the battle raged on, Karna's demeanor shifted. He rallied the Kaurava divisions, urging them onward with words that sparked their courage and determination. In this transient world, everything is ephemeral, he declared. Thinking of this, I regard everything as fleeting. With a fire splint in his eye, Karna vowed to protect the Kuru host just as Bhishma had done before him. As Sanjaya narrated, Karna's words became more resolute and determined. He spoke of his intention to slay the Pandavas, those sons of Pandu who had been a thorn in the side of the Kurus for so long. "I shall either achieve this righteous feat, worthy of an honest man," he vowed, "or casting off my life, I shall follow Bhishma." With newfound resolve, Karna ordered his charioteer to prepare him for battle. He donned his armor adorned with gold and jewels, and equipped himself with bows and arrows that shone like fire or poison. His standard, bearing the image of an elephant's girth, was brought forth, its garlands and network of wires sparkling in the fading lights. The sun dipped below the horizon. Karna set out to confront his enemies, determined to vanquish them and bring glory to the Kurus. Sanjaya watched as Karna rode into the fray, his heart filled with a mix of emotions: sorrow for Bhishma's fall, determination to protect his people, and a fierce resolve to The sun beat down on the battle-scarred landscape as Sanjaya gazed upon the fallen form of Bhishma, the venerable grandsire of the Bharatas. The old warrior lay prostrate on a bed of arrows, his body a testament to the ferocity of the fight, his eyes, once bright with the fire of righteousness, now seemed dull and lifeless, like the vast scene drained by mighty winds. As Sanjaya beheld Bhishma's pitiful state, he knew that all hope for victory had vanished along with their coats of mail and peace of mind. The old warrior, who had always been a guiding light to those lost in the fathomless sea of life, now lay helpless, and still his body was a canvas of arrows, as continuous as the stream of Yamuna, each one a testament to his unyielding spirit. Sanjaya's words echoed through the silence as he spoke of Bhishma's greatness. He who looked like Menaka, with energy unbearable, thrown down by Indra, that warrior who resembled the inconceivable Indra himself after his defeat of old by Vritra. The old man's eyes seemed to hold 1,000 stories, each one etched on his withered face. Just then Atira, the son, Karna, alighted from his chariot, his grief and sorrow palpable. He approached Bhishma with joined palms, his voice trembling as he spoke. "I am Karna. Blessed be thou, O Bharata. Speak to me in sacred words, and look at me, opening the eyes." The old warrior's gaze met Karna's, a hint of recognition flickering across his face. Karna's words poured out like a river, his emotions wrought and unbridled though that art. "The foremost among the Kuras, I do not see anyone else who is competent to fill the treasury council or wield weapons as you did." His voice cracked with sorrow as he spoke of Bhishma's passing. "Alas, he who protected us from danger and slew countless warriors now proceeds to the realm of the Pitrastarna's." Words painted the dire picture of the future. The Pandavas, fueled by wrath, would slaughter the Kuras like tigers, slaying dear Arjuna with his Gandhava, would be an unrelenting force, striking fear into the hearts of all who opposed him. Karna's own prowess was no match for the combined might of the Pandavas, and their allies. As he spoke, Karna seemed to channel Bhishma's spirit, drawing strength from the old warrior's legacy. "I am but a mere mortal," he said, "but even I can vanquish that brave and fierce warrior who resembled the snake of virulent poison." His words hung in the air like a challenge, as if daring fate to intervene. As Sanjaya stood before Duryodhana's son, his eyes locked onto the young warrior Karna. The old grandsire Bhishma approached with a warm smile on his face. His words were laced with wisdom, like the gentle flow of a river, and his tone was filled with encouragement. "Karna, you are like the Asin to the rivers," he began, "a source of nourishment and strength, like the sun that illuminates all luminous bodies. Your presence brings light to our dark times. You are the righteous one who protects the truth. Just as fertile soil gives life to seeds, your compassion is like the clouds that bring sustenance to all creatures." Bhishma's words were a testament to Karna's greatness, and his heart swelled with pride. "You have vanquished many kings," he continued, including Nagnajit, who was once the most powerful among them. "You have also defeated the Kamojas, the Amashtas, the Vaidhas, and the Gandharvas. Your prowess in battle is unmatched." Karna's Bhishma spoke, his eyes sparkled with admiration for the young warrior. "You are like Vishnu to us, a protector who watches over our well-being. You have made the Karatas, the Apalas, the Mekhalas, and many other tribes submit to Duryodhana's rule. Your bravery is a beacon of hope in these uncertain times." Bhishma's words were laced with a deep sense of reverence for Karna. "You are not just a warrior, but a refuge for our kin and friends," he said, "like the celestial gods who depend on the thousand-eyed when your family relies on you. For protection and guidance you must be their shield in battle, just as you have always been." As Bhishma finished speaking, Karna's face shone with gratitude. He bowed his head to the old grandsire, a gesture of respect and humility. "I will not fail," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I will lead our army into battle and bring victory to Duryodhana." With Bhishma's blessing still echoing in his mind, Karna made his way through the vast encampment of the Kiraba. Host the warriors parted before him, their faces filled with joy and admiration for the mighty armed warrior who had come to lead them into battle. As Karna took up his position at the head of the army, the Kiravas erupted in a cacophony of cheers and roars, their bows twanged and armpits slapped together in celebration. The air was filled with the sound of leonine roars and the rustling of armor as the warriors prepared to face their enemies. With Karna at its helm, the Kaurava army was ready to march into battle. The sun beat down upon the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled warriors. Sanjaya stood among them, his eyes fixed on Karna, the mighty warrior who had just mounted his chariot. Duryodhana's face lit up with joy as he beheld Karna, and he exclaimed, "This host protected by thee hath, now I think, got a proper leader." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the gathered troops. "Let that be settled now which is proper and within our power." Karna smiled graciously at Duryodhana's words, his eyes shining with respect for the king. "Tell us this self, O Tejir, among men," he said, "for thou art the wisest of kings, another can never see so well what should be done as one who sees, if whose concern is." He glanced around at the other warriors, his voice filled with conviction. "Those kings are all desirous of listening to what thou mayst have to say. I am sure that no improper words will be uttered by the Duryodhana's expression turned somber as he began to speak. His eyes clouded over and his voice dropped to a more serious tone. Bhishma was our commander, possessed as he was of years' prowess and learning, and supported by all our warriors. He said that high-souled one, O Karna, achieving great glory and slaying large numbers of my enemies, protected us by fair fight for 10 days. He achieved the most difficult of feats." Duryodhana's voice cracked with emotion as he continued, "But now that he is about to ascend to heaven, whom, O Karna, dost thou think fit to our commander after him?" Karna listened intently to Duryodhana's words, his brow furrowed in thought. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the king's face. "Without a leader, an army cannot stay in battle for even a short while," he said. Finally, "Thou art foremost in battle, like a boat without a helmsman in the waters. Indeed, as a boat without a helmsman, or a car without a driver, would go anywhere, so would the plight be of a host that is without a leader." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the assembled troops. Once more Duryodhana's eyes locked onto Karna's, and he spoke with urgency. "Look, thou, therefore, among all the high-souled warriors of our army, and find out a proper leader who may succeed the son of Santanu," he said, "him whom thou wouldst regard as a fit leader in battle. Him all of us, without doubt, will together make our leader." Karna's face was set in determination as he began to speak. "All these foremost of men are high-souled persons," he said. As Sanjaya stood by King Duryodhana's side, he listened intently as Karna spoke with fervor and conviction. The words dripped like honeyed nectar, filling the air with an air of determination and hope. When Karna finished speaking, Duryodhana turned to his trusted advisor Drona, who was standing among the troops. Duryodhana's eyes sparkled with a fire's light as he began to speak, his voice carrying across the battlefield like a mighty storm. "O Drona," he said, "you are the embodiment of all that is noble and just. Your birthright, your lineage, your wisdom, and your prowess in battle make you superior to all others. You possess the qualities of a great leader: intelligence, policy, and self-control. Your ascetic austerities have earned you a place among the gods, and your gratitude towards us is boundless." As Duryodhana spoke, his words wove a spell of admiration over the assembled kings. They nodded in agreement, their faces filled with awe and respect for the wise Brahmana. "Protect us, O Drona," Duryodhana continued, as Vasava protects the celestials. "With you as our leader, we shall vanquish our foes and emerge victorious." The troops erupted into a thunderous cheer, their voices echoing through the valleys like a chorus of lions. The kings, inspired by Duryodhana's words, began to chant his name in unison, their voices rising and falling like the waves of an Ocean. "Drona, Drona," they cried, as if invoking the gods themselves to bless their leader. The troops, filled with joy and anticipation, surged forward like a great river, eager to follow their new commander into battle. The then subsided Drona stepped forward, his eyes shining with a deep understanding of the task ahead. He looked at Duryodhana with a nod of acceptance and began to speak in a voice that carried across the battlefield like a gentle breeze. "I shall lead you," he said, "into battle against our enemies. With my guidance we shall emerge victorious, just as Indra slew the Danavas." The troops cheered once more, their voices echoing through the valleys as they prepared to face their foes. Duryodhana's eyes gleamed with triumph as he gazed upon his new commander. "I know that Arjuna will not be able to strike," he said with confidence. "With you at our head, we shall vanquish Yudhishthira and all his followers in battle." The troops roared their approval, their voices carrying on the wind as they marched forward into the fray. The battle-scared warriors prepared for war. Drona stood tall among them, his eyes ablaze with a fierce determination. He was the chosen leader of the sun was setting over the battle-scarred plains of Kurukshetra as Drona. The Rebbe teacher and warrior prepared to face off against the Pandavas. He stood before King Dhritarashtra, his eyes gleaming with a fierce determination. I know the Vedas in all their branches, Drona declared. I am familiar with the Seva, Weapon, and many other forms of combat. I will fight with the Pandavas, but I must warn you, O king, that I will not be able to defeat the son of Prishada. Dhritarashtra's eyes widened in concern as Drona continued. As for the Pandavas, they will not face me with joyful hearts, but I will still fight them, and I will vanquish the Samikas. With a nod from King Dhritarashtra, Drona was invested with command of the Kaurava army, his troops cheering as he took up his position on the battlefield. The drums beat out a fierce rhythm, and the cants blared their loud triumphant notes as Drona arrayed his troops in battle formation. The ground trembled beneath the feet of the warriors. The air was filled with the sound of drums and the clash of steel on steel. Karna, the mighty Kar warrior, stood at the forefront of the Kaurava army, his standard bearing the image of an elephant's rope shining like the sun. Of Pandavas, led by Arjuna, stood at the head of their forces, their banner emblazoned with the device of the ape. The two armies faced each other, their warriors eager for battle. As the fight began, the earth shook beneath their feet, and the sky grew dark with the dust raised by the clash. The battle raged on with Drona unleashing a storm of arrows against the Pandavas. Yajna's son Prashadyama broke through Drona's lines with his own arrowy showers, but the mighty Kar warrior rallied his troops and pressed forward once more as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in a bloody glow. It seemed as though the very gods themselves had descended to earth. The din of battle was deafening, and the air was thick with the stench of blood, and Swaydrama's chariot cut through the Pandava forces like a sieve through wheat, leaving destruction in its wake. The mighty warrior's speed and skill were all in spearing, and his troops followed him into the fray with reckless abandon. The battle reached its crescendo. It seemed as though nothing could stop Drona and the Kauravas from emerging victorious. But Arjuna, the greatest of all bowmen, stood firm at the head of the Pandava army, his eyes fixed intently on his foe. The sun was setting over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the chaos that unfolded before it. Drona, the venerable warrior and preceptor to the Pandavas, rode into battle on his majestic chariot, his red steeds galloping like the wind as he unleashed a torrent of arrows upon the enemy. Sanjaya, the narrator, watched in awe as Drona's arrows rained down upon the Pandava, striking true and felling warriors left and right. The sound of clashing steel, the screams of the wounded, and the thunder of hoofs on the battlefield created a cacophony that echoed across the lands. The battle raged on. King Yudhishthira rallied his troops, urging them to surround Drona with care. Arjuna and Trishtadyumna, two of the greatest warriors of their time, led the charge against the venerable preceptor. But Drona was no ordinary warrior. He was a force of nature, unleashing his wrath upon the battlefield like a tempest. This chariot, emblazoned with the emblem of his family, seemed to move of its own accord, as if driven by the very spirits of war themselves. The wind whipped through Drona's hair, and his eyes blazed with an inner fire as he cut down enemy warriors with ease. Of Pandavas, led by Bhima and Arjuna, fought valiantly against the onslaught. But Drona seemed invincible. His arrows flew thick and fast, striking true time and again, and sending the enemy reeling back in terror. The battle reached its climax. Drona's standard, a gleaming golden banner emblazoned with his family emblem, seemed to dance across the battlefield, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The earth itself seemed to tremble beneath the feet of the combatants as they clashed in the frenzy of steel and blood. In the end, it was Trishtadyumna who proved to be Drona's nemesis, striking him down with a single arrow that pierced his heart like a shaft of lightning. As the preceptor fell from his chariot, the battlefield erupted into chaos, with warriors on both sides rushing to claim the body of the fallen. Hera gods themselves seemed to weep at the loss of Drona, and the earth trembled beneath their collective grief. The Pandavas, victorious but wary, let out a mighty roar as they claimed the spoils of war. But even in triumph, there was a sense of sorrow that hung over them like a shadow as the dust settled on the battlefield. Sanjaya's voice whispered through the silence, recounting the tale of Drona's final battle. a testament to his bravery, his skill, and his unwavering dedication to his duty as a warrior. The sun had set over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the carnage. Dhritarashtra, king of Hastinapura and father of Duryodhana, sat on his throne, his face etched with grief. He turned to his charioteer Sanjaya and asked, "Tell me, how did my son's teacher Drona meet his end in battle? Was it a blow from an enemy's arrow or a careless moment of distraction?" Sanjaya began to recount the tale of Drona's demise. It was no ordinary warrior who slew him. He said Dhrishtadyumna, son of Prishad, had been waiting for his chance to strike. He surrounded Drona with his troops, and when the moment was right, he launched a fierce attack. Dhritarashtra's eyes widened as Sanjaya continued. Drona, that mighty warrior who had studied the 4 Vedas and was revered by all as a Brahmana and a Kshatriya, fell to the ground. His golden chariot, adorned with tiger skins, lay abandoned, its steeds still yoked, but now motionless. The king's voice trembled with emotion. "How could this be? Drona, who had been my son's teacher and mentor, had always been invincible in battle. He was a scorcher of foes, a protector of the righteous, and a restrainer of the wicked. His presence on the battlefield was like a beacon of hope for my son." Sanjaya nodded sympathetically. "I know, O king, that you are consumed by grief, but the truth is that destiny is not to be denied. Even the bravest warriors can fall victim to fate's whims." Drona's death was no surprise to anyone who saw him on the battlefield that day. Dhritarashtra's face contorted in anguish as he asked, "But how did it happen? Who were the warriors who fought alongside Drona, protecting him from harm? And what of his steeds, those magnificent creatures that had been yoked to his chariot for so many years?" Sanjaya hesitated before answering. "The truth is, O king, that even the greatest warriors can fall prey to the tides of battle. The Kakayas, Kshitas, Kurushas, Matsyas, and other kings who surrounded Drona pressed him hard like ants upon a snake, and in the midst of this chaos, Dhritarashtra struck the final blow." The king's eyes seemed to glaze over as he murmured, "I am losing my senses. Let us suspend this discourse for now. I will ask you again when I have regained my composure." With a wave of his hand he dismissed Sanjaya and sank into thought, lost in the depths of his. The sun had barely risen over the kingdom of Hastinapura when Dhritarashtra's heart began to itch with an unbearable grief. His son Duryodhana was nowhere to be found, and his army was faltering against the Pandavas. Vesabhayana, a wise sage, approached him with words of caution, but it was too late. The king's sorrow had consumed him, and he fell to the ground, his attendants rushing to revive him as they sprinkled him with perfumed water and fanned him gently. The royal ladies surrounded him, their voices choked with tears, as they rubbed his hands and helped him sit up. But Dhritarashtra remained motionless, lost in his despair. It was only when a tremor passed over his body that he slowly regained consciousness. The king's eyes fluttered open, and he gazed at Vesabhayana with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Tell me," he demanded, "who among my warriors resisted the Pandavas who stood against Ajatasattu, the mighty son of Kunti?" As he charged into battle like an elephant with rent temples, his voice shook with rage. Vesabhayana recounted the tale of the war, and Dhritarashtra listened intently. He heard of Arjuna's unyielding arrows piercing the hearts of his enemies with ease, of Vimesna's unrelenting fury crushing all who stood in his way, of Nakula's swift and silent approach striking fear into the hearts of those he encountered. The king's face contorted with anguish as he listened to Vesabhayana's words. He asked about each warrior one by one. Satyakai, the mighty Bowman; Sahadeva, the prince of modesty and unyielding bravery; Duryodhana, the bull among men who had crushed the Savara king's host with ease. As the tale unfolded, Dhritarashtra's despair deepened. He realized that his army was no match for the Pandavas, and that even the gods themselves would be powerless against them. "My warriors are but mere mortals," he whispered to Vesabhayana. "How can they hope to vanquish the likes of Arjuna, who wields the Gandharva like a divine instrument?" The king's eyes grew dim as he listened to the tale of his own downfall. He saw himself and his sons as but mere pawns in a game controlled by forces beyond their comprehension. And yet, even in defeat, Dhritarashtra found solace in the knowledge that his warriors had fought with honor, their bravery unwavering against overwhelming odds. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the kingdom in a golden glow, Dhritarashtra's thoughts turned to his son Duryodhana. He knew that the war was lost, and the sun was setting on the kingdom of Hastinapura as Dhritarashtra, the blind king, sat in his chamber surrounded by his attendants. He called upon Sanjaya, his charioteer and advisor, to recount the celestial feats of Vasudeva Krishna, also known as Govinda. Tell me, O Sanjaya, Dhritarashtra said, the stories of Krishna's bravery and prowess. I wish to hear about the time he slew Hayagriva, a powerful Danava, who lived in the woods on the shores of the Yamuna River. Krishna was just a boy then, but he demonstrated his might by killing this formidable. For Sanjaya began to narrate the tale. As you know, O King, Krishna was raised by Nanda, a coward, and it was there that he first showed his remarkable strength. He killed Hayagriva with his bare arms, proving himself to be a force to be reckoned with even at a young age. Dhritarashtra's curiosity was piqued as Sanjaya continued. Krishna's exploits did not stop there, O King. He also slew the mighty Asuras, including Pramba, Narakat, Jama, and all of whom were known for their incredible strength. And then, of course, there was Kansa, a powerful king who was protected by Jarasandha. Krishna fought him in battle, aided only by his own prowess, and emerged victorious. As Sanjaya spoke, Dhritarashtra's mind wandered back to the time when he had witnessed Krishna's incredible feats. First then he remembered how Krishna had single-handedly defeated the king of the Shurasnas, Sanuman, and his entire army. And then there was the time, Sanjaya said, when Krishna vanquished all the kings at a self-cross, bearing away the daughter of the king of the Gandharas as his bride. Those angry kings were yoked to his nuptial car like horses lacerated by the whip. Dhritarashtra shook his head in awe, remembering how Krishna had also caused Jarasandha, the lord of a full Achaltanite troops, to be slain through the instrumentality of another. And there was the time he slew the valiant king of Chedas as if he were some animal on the occasion of the latter's disputing about the Argaya. Sanjaya continued his tale. Dhritarashtra's thoughts turned to the impending battle between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. He knew that Krishna was the key to their victory, and that if he were to join forces with the Pandavas, there would be no stopping them. Tell me everything about how the battle took place, Dhritarashtra said, his voice laced with a mix of. The sun beat down on the battlefield as Sanjaya stood before King Dhritarashtra, recounting the tale of how Drona, the mighty warrior and preceptor of the Kauravas, had fallen to the Pandavas. As he began to speak, a mix of emotions swirled within the king's heart. His eyes fixed intently on Sanjaya, Dhritarashtra's son. Duryodhana had once sought the command of the troops from Drona himself, and in return Drona had offered him a boon. But instead of asking for Yudhishthira's death, as one might expect, Duryodhana had asked that his brother be brought to him alive, vanquished. At this once more Sanjaya's words painted the scene vividly. Praised be Kunti's son, Yudhishthira, who seizing only thou desirest, thou art, without doubt, O Duryodhana, not ignorant of policy. Drona, wise and just, had seen through Duryodhana's intentions. He knew that Yudhishthira was a just king, beloved by all, and that his death would bring no victory to the Kauravas. Instead, it would only lead to more suffering and bloodshed. Sanjaya described how Drona had reflected on this crooked purpose of Duryodhana's, weighing the consequences of his actions. Finally, after a moment of contemplation, Drona had given in to Duryodhana's request, but with one condition, that Arjuna be removed from the battlefield, for if Partha remained, even the gods and Asuras would not dare to face him in battle. Sanjaya's words dripped with reverence as he described Drona's promise. If the heroic Arjuna do not protect Yudhishthira in battle, thou mayst think the eldest Pandava as already brought under thee control. Sanjaya continued his tale. It became clear that Duryodhana had known of Drona's partiality for the Pandavas all along. He had revealed this to his troops, proclaiming the fact that Drona had promised to seize Yudhishthira alive. The king's eyes seemed to glaze over as he listened, lost in thought, weighing the consequences of his own actions. The air was thick with tension as Sanjaya finished his account, leaving Dhritarashtra to ponder the futility of war and the nature of his own desires. In that moment it seemed as though the fate of the Kauravas hung precariously in the balance, like a thread about to snap under the weight of their own avarice. The sun beat down upon the vast army assembled on the battlefield. The air was electric with tension as King Drona, a master warrior and teacher of the great Arjuna, vowed to capture Yudhishthira, the just king of the Pandavas. The promise had been made, and the kings of the land had pledged their support. For this endeavorous news of Drona's vow spread throughout the Pandava camp. A mighty roar erupted from the warriors, blared drums thundered, and cymbals clashed in a cacophony of sound that shook the very foundations of the earth. Yudhishthira however, remained calm and collected, knowing that his spies had already informed him of Drona's intention summoning his brothers and the other kings who stood by his side. Yudhishthira addressed Arjuna, saying, "You have heard of Tejur among men of Drona's vow. Let us adopt measures to prevent the accomplishment of that purpose." He looked at Arjuna with a deep sense of trust, asking him to fight alongside him, so that Duryodhana would not succeed in capturing his brother Arjuna. However, refused to engage in battle against his revered teacher, as the slaughter of my preceptor can never be accomplished by me. He said, "So I can never consent to give you up, O king. I would rather yield up my life in battle than fight against my preceptor." His words were laced with conviction and devotion as he pledged his unwavering loyalty to Yudhishthira. A sound of drum cymbals and smaller drums filled the air once more as the Pandava army prepared for battle. The high-souled warriors let out mighty roars, their bowstrings twining with an ominous twine that echoed through the heavens. The Kuruks, led by Drona, responded in kind, arraying themselves in a formidable line of battalions. The two armies clashed. The air was filled with the scent of blood, and swift arrows whizzed through the air, their deadly tips glinting in the sunlight. Drona, like a blazing sun, rode at the forefront of his army, crushing the Pandava ranks beneath his feet. His sharp shafts shot forth in all directions, striking fear into the hearts of the Pandavas. The Srinjayas, though valiant warriors, were unable to withstand the might of Drona's host. The mighty Kaur warriors of Duryodhana's army, too, found themselves no match for the combined forces of Drona and Arjuna. Protected by their revered teacher and his son, both armies seemed frozen in time like two blossoming forests, standing still in the silence of the night. Drona's chariot carried through the sun beat down upon the battlefield as Drona, the renowned warrior, rode forth in his golden chariot. His bow, a marvel of craftsmanship, seemed to sing with every twang, its sound echoing through the air like the rumble of thunder. The Pandava host trembled at the sight of him, their divisions scattering before the fury of his attack as Drona carried through the enemy ranks. His arrows flew swift and true, striking down Kaur warriors, horsemen, and elephant warriors alike. His chariot, with its golden deck, seemed to blaze like lightning amidst the dark cloud, inspiring fear in the hearts of all who beheld it. The very earth itself seemed to shudder beneath the impact of his wrath. The battle raged on, with Drona at its center. Pandava warriors, led by Yudhishthira, rushed towards him from all sides, but he stood firm, his bow singing out as he unleashed arrow after arrow upon them. The clash of steel on steel echoed through the air, and the cries of the wounded and dying filled the skies as the battle reached its crescendo. Other warriors took their turn in the fray. Sakanaya, master of deceit, clashed with Sahadeva, while Suva's son faced off against Demisna. The latter, too, fought on foot, their masses crashing together as they sported like two mountain peaks nearby. Drona continued to wreak havoc upon the enemy lines, his arrows flying swift and true. Bhagadata, a mighty warrior from the land of pride, Jyotisha, engaged King Drupada in single combat. Their battle, a spectacle to behold, Bemisna clashed with Vivin's eye, but the latter proved a formidable foe, felling Bemisna's steeds and standard before jumping down to face him on footus. The fight raged on. Other warriors took their turn in the fray. Satyakaya, a skilled archer, pierced Kritavarman through the chest with a single arrow, while Drishtaku clashed with Kripa. Their battle, a display of martial prowess. Bhairata, aided by his Matsya warriors, resisted Vaikurtna's son, and King Drupada faced off against Bhagadata. The battle was a maelstrom of steel and blood, with warriors clashing on all sides. Drona stood at its center, his bow singing out as he unleashed arrow after arrow upon the enemy lines. The very earth itself seemed to shudder beneath the impact of his wrath, and the skies themselves echoed with the cries of the wounded and dying as the fight raged on. It seemed that no warrior could stand against Drona's might. His arrows flew swift and true, striking down all who dared oppose him. The battle was a testament to his unyielding prowess and the Pandava host. In the midst of a fierce battle between the Kuruks and the Pandavas, Dhritarashtra, the king of Hastinapura, requested his charioteer Sanjaya to narrate an exciting duel that had taken place earlier. Dhritarashtra's envy for those who could see the battle unfold was palpable as he described it as a spectacle worthy of the gods, and the Azura Sanjaya obliged, recounting the story of Artemi Salya versus Savedra's son Bhima. The scene unfolded with Salya, enraged by his driver's death, leaping down from his chariot to confront Bhima. Both warriors grasped their massive iron masses and began to circle each other, their movements swift and deadly as The duel commenced. The battlefield erupted into a cacophony of sounds. Trumpets blared, shouted drums, thundered, and leonine roars echoed through the air. The two combatants, Celia and Dema, were like two titans, their masses flashing in the sunlight as they clashed with a force that sent sparks flying. The duel raged on, each blow landing with deafening impact, sending both warriors stumbling back. But neither could gain the upper hand. Their strength and ferocity, matched only by the fury of the battle itself. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Celia's mask shattered under Dema's crushing blows. Celia lay defeated on the field. His car warrior Kritavarman rushed to his aid, lifting him onto his chariot and bearing him away from the fray. Meanwhile, Dema rose up, his massive frame towering over the battlefield like a colossus, his mask still clutched in his hand. The sight of Celia's retreat sent shivers through Dhritarashtra's army. His sons, their elephants, foot soldiers, and cavalry all trembled with fear as they turned tail and fled in disarray. The Pandavas, on the other hand, emerged victorious from the duel, their valor and strength radiating like blazing fires across the battlefield. As the dust settled, the Pandavas celebrated their triumph with triumphant roars and the blaring of drum cymbals and other instruments filling the air. In that moment they stood resplendent, their glory shining brighter than any star in the firmament. The war raged on its fury unabated. Sanjaya watched in awe as Vrishesna, the valiant son of Karna, single-handedly defended the Kaurava army against the onslaught of the Pandavas with a display of illusionary prowess. He shot thousands of arrows that pierced through men, horses, chariots, and elephants, their might rivaling the sun's radiance in the summer season. The Pandavas, led by Nakula's son, Satanaka, rushed to surround Vrishesna, but the young warrior cut them down with ease. The sons of Draupadi, determined to rescue their brother, joined the fray, and soon their arrow showers made Karna's son invisible. However, Drona's son Aswadama quickly came to his aid, covering the Pandavas' mighty car warriors with Divarsaros. The battle between the two armies intensified, with neither side yielding. The heroic Kauravas and Pandavas fought on, their rage and animosity fueled by past offenses. Their bodies seemed to radiate energy like Garuda and Nagas battling in the sky. Thema, Karna, Kripa, Drona, Aswadama, Kreshetu's son Satyakaya, and the ruler of Matsyas were among those who clashed, their presence illuminating the field like the all-destroying sun that rises at the end of the Yugas. The fight raged on. The Kaurava host began to falter. Drona, his eyes ablaze with fury, pierced through the Pandavas' ranks, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. He slew Kumara, the protector of Yudhishthira's car wheels, and continued to advance against Yudhishthira himself. The Pandava army, however, refused to yield. They surrounded Drona on all sides, scattering countless arrows as they tried to impede his progress. Vegradat, the prince of the Panchalas, pierced Drona with 50 keen-pointed arrows, and Singhasna quickly followed suit. Drona, his eyes expanding in rage, cut off the heads decked with earrings from both Singhasna and Vedradatta's trunks. He afflicted the other mighty car warriors of the Pandavas with arrowy showers, standing like all-destroying death himself before Yudhishthira's chariot. The warriors of Yudhishthira's army cried out in despair, "The king is slain," as Drona stood victorious. But their cries were short-lived, for Arjuna, the son of Kunti, suddenly appeared on the scene, filling the air with the rattle of his chariot and creating a river of blood that bore away brave warriors to the realm of the departedus. The day the sun had set on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the armies of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. The troops of both sides had retreated to their tents, weary from the day's fighting. But amidst the quiet, a sense of unease settled over Drona. The revered teacher and commander of the Kaurava forces, Drona, approached his nephew Duryodhana, his eyes filled with concern. "I told you before," he said, his voice heavy with regret, "that when Arjuna is by Yudhishthira's side, he is invincible in battle. Despite our best efforts, we were unable to defeat him. If only Arjuna could be drawn away from the king's side, I would seize Yudhishthira and bring him under your control." Duryodhana listened intently, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew that Drona was right. Arjuna was a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield, and so he turned to the Trigardas, a powerful clan of warriors who had been eager for battle. A leader of the Trigards, Satyavrata, stepped forward along with his 4 brothers. "We have been humiliated by Arjuna too many times," he said, his voice burning with determination. "We will take him out of the field and slay him, no matter what the cost." And so the Trigardas made a vow to Duryodhana. They would either defeat Arjuna or die trying. They lit fires on the battlefield, symbolizing their commitment to this noble cause, and as they stood before the flames, They invoked the gods, swearing that if they failed to slay Arjuna, the regions of the afterlife reserved for those who had never taken a vow would be theirs. Meanwhile, Arjuna was summoned by Yudhishthira, who told him of Drona's plan. "You must protect me, my son," he said, his eyes filled with trust. And so Arjuna set out to face the Trigartas, ready to defend his king and uphold his own vows. The two armies clashed on the battlefield. The sound of drums and conches echoed through the air. The Ganga and the Saryu rivers, swollen from the monsoon rains, seemed to come alive in the chaos of battle, and Arjuna, like a hungry lion, stalked his prey, ready to unleash his wrath upon the Trigartas. The stage was set for a great confrontation, one that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom and decide the fate of its rulers. The sun beat down on the vast expanse of the battlefield as the Samsaptakas, a formidable force of warriors, gathered their strength with joy and anticipation. Etched on their faces, they formed an array in the shape of a half-moon, their chariots standing like a phalanx of steel in the open plain. As Arjuna, the illustrious warrior with the diadem-decked helmet, rode towards them, the Samsaptakas' eyes lit up with delight. They let out thunderous shouts that echoed across the sky and the four cardinal directions, their voices like a chorus of triumphant lions. The air reverberated with the din of war as they prepared to face their nemesis Sanjaya. The narrator watched with keen interest as Arjuna approached the Samsaptakas' ranks. With a hint of a smile, he turned to Krishna and said, "Behold, O thou that hast Devaki for thy mother, those Trigarta brothers who are about to perish in battle are filled with delight at a time when they should weep." Arjuna's Devadatta shone like gold as he blew it with great force. The blare of the conch was deafening, and the Samsaptakas' chariot host froze in terror. Their animals paralyzed with fear, they let out a collective scream, their eyes wide open in horror, as if petrified by some unseen force. The Trigartas regained their composure and launched a barrage of arrows at Arjuna, but the skilled warrior cut them down. With these he shot 5 and 10 arrows, slicing through the hail of projectiles like a sieve through wheat. The Samsaptakas' arrows pierced Arjuna's diadem, but he stood firm, his gold-ornamented helmet shining like the newly risen sun. A battle raged on, the two armies clashing in a frenzy of steel and blood. Satyam, the Trigartas leader, tried to rally his men, but Arjuna was relentless. With broad-headed arrows he cut off the leather fence surrounding Suva's chariot and slew his steeds. As the Trigartas began to falter, their standards made of gold lay broken on the ground. Satyam himself fell to Arjuna's arrows, his head severed from his trunk like a ripe fruit plucked from a tree. The Samsaptakas' army broke and fled in terror, abandoning their fallen courageous Vasava's son. Arjuna, filled with wrath, unleashed a maelstrom of arrows upon the fleeing host, cutting them down like a scythe through a harvest field. The Trigartas stood frozen, paralyzed by fear, as Partha Strait shafts tore through their ranks like a stormy wind. As Sanjaya watched, Arjuna's eyes blazed with determination as he gazed upon the Samsaptakas, his enemies who refused to yield in battle. He turned to Krishna, his charioteer and friend, and urged him to urge the steeds forward. "Let us show them the true might of my arms." And Bal Arjuna declared, his voice trembling with anticipation, "Today I will unleash a fury upon them that will be remembered for ages." Krishna smiled, his eyes glinting with amusement as he nodded in agreement. He grasped the reins of the chariot steeds, and they sprang forward like living flames. The car itself seemed to come alive, its wheels spinning with a speed and ferocity that left all who saw it. It was struck as they hurtled towards the Samsaptakas. Arjuna grasped his Gandhava bow at string, humming with tension. The battle raged on, the Samsaptakas surrounding Arjuna and Krishna like a stormy sea. But Arjuna was undaunted, his focus fixed on the enemy lines, as he unleashed arrow after arrow, each one finding its mark with deadly precision. The air was filled with the cacophony of clashing steel and the screams of the wounded. Krishna meanwhile watched with a mixture of concern and admiration as Arjuna's fury intensified. He knew that his friend's wrath was not to be underestimated, for in this moment Arjuna was a force of nature, unstoppable and unyielding. As the battle raged on, Krishna's words were lost in the din of war where art, "Thou, O Partha, I do not see thee," but Arjuna did not falter, his mind fixed on his goal, as he unleashed a maelstrom of arrows that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The Samsaptakas stumbled back, their lines wavering under the onslaught, and then in an instant the tide of battle turned, for Arjuna's Vaidya weapon had dispelled the enemy's arrow showers. leaving them exposed and vulnerable. The dust settled, the field of battle revealed its true horror of a sea of bodies, their limbs torn from their trunks like autumn leaves. The sound of clashing steel grew fainter, replaced by the moans of the dying and the wails of the bereaved. And in the midst of this carnage, Arjuna's chariot shone like a beacon, its wheels still spinning with a deadly fury that seemed to defy all reason. But even as the battle raged on, another threat emerged for Drona. The great warrior and teacher had rallied his forces and was now marching towards Yudhishthira. Determined to seize him, the stage was set for yet another clash of steel, and the sun had barely risen over it, the vast battlefield casting a golden glow over it. The assembled armies of the Kauravas and the Pandava Sanjaya, the royal charioteer, stood by the side of King Dhritarashtra, narrating the events that were about to unfold. As the mighty warrior Arjuna, son of Bharadwaja, prepared for battle, he turned to his friend Satana and said, "I am yours, O king. I have made arrangements for Partha's encounter with the Samsatikas." With a determined look on his face, Arjuna rode out to meet the enemy forces. Meanwhile, Drona, the renowned teacher of the Kauravas, had arrayed his troops in the form of a Garuda, with himself at its head. His son Aswadaman formed one eye of the bird-like formation, while King Duryodhana and his uncles stood guard at its beak. The army was a marvel to behold, with hundreds and thousands of elephants, steeds, cars, and foot soldiers stationed at its neck at the rear of the Garuda. The Kalingnas, Mashtas, Magatas, Pondras, Madrakas, Gandharas, Secanas, Easterners, Mountaineers, and Vesetas stood ready to face any threat from behind. At the tail of the formation, Vaikartana's son Karna stood tall, surrounded by his son's kinsmen and friends. As the two armies clashed, the earth shook beneath their feet. The Praejyotisha's ruler of the Eastern Kingdom rode into battle on his majestic elephant, looking like the rising sun in all its glory. His army was a sea of steel, with kings from the hilly regions surrounding him like the gods themselves. Yudhishthira, king of the Pandavas, beheld a formidable array and turned to Drishtadyumna for advice. "O Lord," he said, "let us adopt measures that I may not be taken prisoner by Drona." Drishtadyumna, son of Drupada, reassured Yudhishthira, saying, "Fear not, O king, I shall check Drona today with all his followers." With a fierce battle cry, Drishtadyumna charged at Drona, scattering arrows and sending the enemy reeling. Dharmuka, son of Dhritarashtra, rushed to defend his father, but was quickly overwhelmed by Drishtadyumna's heroic downpour. As the battle raged on, it became a chaotic melee, with warriors from both sides fighting for their lives. Cars and elephants crashed into each other, while men fought men, steeds clashed with steeds, and car warriors battled car war. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Drona, the preceptor, beheld Yudhishthira standing fearlessly before him. With a thick shower of arrows, Drona received the Pandava prince, sending shockwaves through the troops of Yudhishthira's army. The sound was like that of a mighty lion attacking an elephant herd, and the brave Satyajit, son of Panchala, rushed to Yudhishthira's aid. Drona, however, was not one to be underestimated. He was a master warrior renowned for his prowess in battle. With great might he clashed with Satyajit, their bows ringing out as they exchanged arrow after arrow. The two warriors fought like Indra and Vala, their movements swift and deadly. Satyajit, undaunted by Drola's ferocity, invoked the mighty weapon and pierced the preceptor with keen-pointed arrows. He struck Drola's charioteer with 5 fatal arrows, each looking like death himself. The charioteer fell, his senses lost to the battling Satyajit. Quickly pierced Drona's steeds with 10 shafts and filled him with rage. He then cut off Drona's standard, that of the crusher of foes. Drona beheld these feats and mentally resolved to dispatch Satyajit to the other world. The preceptor swiftly cut off Satyajit's bow with an arrow fixed therein and pierced him with 10 arrows capable of penetrating into the very vitals. Undeterred, Satyajit quickly took up another bow and struck Drona with 30 arrows winged with the feathers of the Kanka. Bird of Pandava shouted in joy at this display, waving their garments as they beheld Drona thus encountered by Satyajit. But Drona was far from defeated. He opened his eyes wide, mustering all his energy, and cut off the bows of both Satyajit and Vrika with 6 shafts. Drona slew Vrika with his charioteer and steeds. Satyajit took up another bow taller than before and pierced Drola's steeds, charioteer, and standard. The preceptor could not brook this act, and he quickly shot his arrows at the prince of Panchalas. Drona covered Satyajit's steeds and centers with incessant showers of arrows, as well as the handle of his bow and both Parshnai drivers. But though his bows were repeatedly cut off, Satyajit continued to battle him, conversant with the highest weapons the combat raged on Drona. Cut off Satyajit's head. With the crescent shaped arrow the prince of Panchalis fell, and the sun beat down upon the battlefield as Dhritarashtra's words hung in the air, a mixture of awe and curiosity. "Tell me, O Sanjaya," he said, his voice laced with wonder, "who were those brave warriors who approached Drona?" That mighty bowman stationed at the head of his troops. Sanjaya's eyes scanned the horizon as he began to recount the events of the day. The Panchalas, Pandavas, Matsyas, Srinjayas, Cheetahs, and Kalakyas had all been routed by Drona's arrows, their forces broken like reeds in a tempest. Tossed the scene as Sanjaya spoke, the sound of leonine shouts and clashing steel echoed across the field. Duryodhana's voice rose above the din, his words dripping with triumph as he addressed Karna. "Behold, O Radha's son, the Panchalas are broken by that firm bowman. Like a herd of wild deer frightened by a lion, they will not return to battle. Drona has shattered them like mighty trees in a storm. Karna listened intently, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. "No, my king," he said, his voice steady and calm, "the Pandavas will not abandon this fight. That fierce warrior is already turning back to face us, and with him come the Panchalas, Kakayas, Matsyas, and especially the Pandavas themselves. Brave warriors, all possessed of great might and prowess." As Karna spoke, a sense of foreboding settled over Duryodhana's face. He knew that his brother was right. The burden on Drona would soon become too great to bear. "Let us go quickly," he said, turning to Sanjaya, "to where Drona is stationed. We must not let those warriors slay him like wolves attacking a mighty elephant." With these words, the king and his brothers set off towards Drona's chariot, their footsteps heavy with purpose. As they approached the epicenter of the battle, the sound of war drums echoed through the air, growing louder by the minute as the Pandavas returned to the fight on their magnificent steeds, driven by a single-minded desire to slay Drona alone. The sun was setting over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled warriors. Dhritarashtra, the blind king of Hastinapura, sat on his throne, eager for news from the front lines. He turned to Sanjaya, his charioteer and advisor, and asked him to describe the approaching army. Sanjaya began to paint a vivid picture with his words. "Behold, O king," he said, "Memesna, the fierce warrior, advances on his chariot, drawn by steeds of dappled hue like those of the antelope. Satyakite, the grandson of Sinai, followed closely behind, borne by steeds of a silvery sheen." The air was electric with anticipation as Sanjaya continued to describe the approaching armies. The irresistible Eudamani, son of Drupada, rode into view, his chariot drawn by steeds of variegated hue. Drestad Yamna, another Panchala prince, followed on the chariot, borne by steeds with golden trappings and the speed of pigeons. Sanjaya's words conjured up images of each warrior, their faces set with determination as they rode towards Drona. The great Bowmana Sanjaya described the warriors. Dhritarashtra's anxiety grew. He knew that his son Duryodhana was facing a formidable foe in Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas. The king's mind was filled with doubts and fears as he listened to Sanjaya's words, but Sanjaya continued to paint a picture of the approaching armies. He described Nakilat, borne by beautiful steeds from the Cambodia, breed, their coats glistening like the feathers of green parrots dart. Steeds like those of the clouds bore Atmohias towards battle. Sahadeva rode on fleet steeds with variegated hue, while Yudhishthira was borne on steeds as white as the wind. As Sanjaya's words poured forth, Dhritarashtra felt a sense of awe and wonder. He had never seen such an array of warriors, each one more magnificent than the last. The king's doubts began to fade, replaced by a sense of trepidation. For the battles ahead, the armies drew closer, their steeds thundering across the plain as they approached Drona's position. Sanjaya's words were like a drumbeat building towards a crescendo of sound and fury on the battlefield. The king sat in rapt attention, his mind racing with thoughts of war and victory. And then, just as the armies were about to clash, Sanjaya fell silent. Dhritarashtra turned to him, his eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Tell me, O Sanjaya," he said, "what lies ahead?" The sun beat down upon the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the armies clashing in a frenzy of steel and sound. Dhritarashtra king of Hastinapura, gazed out at the chouse with a mixture of fascination and concern. He turned to his charioteer Sanjaya and asked, "Tell me, how did Partha and my warriors fare against each other? What did Arjuna do to the Samsaptakas? And what did they do in return?" Sanjaya's voice was like a gentle breeze on the summer day as he began his tale. When the troops were engaged, your son Duryodhana led the charge against the Mesna with his elephant division at the forefront like two titans colliding. Bhima and Duryodhana clashed in a frenzy of trumpeting elephants and flashing steel. Sanjaya spoke the saying, unfolded before Dhritarashtra's eyes, like a painting come to life. Bhima, that mighty son of Pandu, rode into battle with his characteristic ferocity. His arrows flying true as he shattered Duryodhana's elephant division. Like reeds in a storm, the elephants, their hides cracked and bleeding, stumbled backward in disarray. But Duryodhana was not one to be swayed by defeat. He rallied his troops and charged at Bhima, once more his bow singing with deadly precision as he struck the Pandava warrior again and again. Bhima, however, refused to yield, his rage burning brighter with each blow. With a mighty roar, he cut down Duryodhana's bow and standard, sending the Kaurava prince stumbling backward us. The battle raged on. Another elephant, led by King Bhagadata of Pragjyotish, charged into the fray against Bhima. The air was filled with the thunder of trumpeting elephants as the two titans clashed in a frenzy of steel and sound. Bhima dodged and waved beneath the elephant's massive body, striking at its legs, and trumped with his bare arms. The battle was a blur of color and sound, with elephants and horses running wild as their riders fought for their lives. Yudhishthira, king of the Pandavas, surrounded Bhagadata on all sides with his army. But the Prajyotisha king proved to be a formidable foe, using his elephant to devastating effect against the Pandava Ustas. The fight wore on. Bhima's rage grew, driving him to confront Bhagadata. Once more the two elephants clashed in a file of apocalyptic struggle. Their trunks entwined as they fought for dominance. In the end it was Bhagadata who emerged victorious, his elephant sending Bhima fleeing in disarray. But even as the Kaurava army celebrated its victory, a new threat emerged from the chaos of battle. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Sanjaya spoke to Arjuna of the mighty feats being performed by Bhagadata. The dust rose high into the air, and the wail of the troops echoed through the land. Arjuna's eyes narrowed as he beheld the Prajyotisha's ruler atop his elephant, its massive form charging forward with great impetuous. Lair of Madhu, Arjuna said to Krishna, "It seems that Bhagadata has arrived on the battlefield. His elephant is unlike any other, and he himself is a warrior unmatched in battle. I fear that it will take more than just us two to stop him." Krishna nodded, his eyes fixed upon the charging elephant. Sanjaya watched as Arjuna's determination grew, his heart burning with a fierce desire to vanquish Bhagadata and send him as a guest to the slayer of Valas. They spoke. The Samsaptika warriors, numbering 14,000, began to return to the battlefield, summoned by their commanders. They rallied behind Arjuna, who stood torn between two courses of action to engage the Samsaptakas or to press onward against Bhagadata. His heart, divided, Arjuna's thoughts whirled with the weight of decision. But then, like a spark striking dry tinder, his resolve flared into being. He would slaughter the Samsaptakas, and in doing so he would thwart the plans of Duryodhana and Karna. With a fierce cry, Arjuna turned back to face the oncoming warriors, his banner emblazoned with the image of the foremost. A battle raged on the air, thick with arrows, as both sides clashed in a maelstrom of steel and fury. The Samsaptakas shot thousands of straight arrows at Arjuna, but he stood firm, his armor dented by the hail of projectiles. Krishna's senses were overwhelmed, his eyes wide with worry, and yet like a thunderbolt striking down from the heavens, Arjuna unleashed the Brahma whip on its power coursing through him. Like liquid fire, the Samsaptakas fell in droves, their arms and bows shattered by the sheer force of Arjuna's arrows. Hundreds of standards and steeds crashed to the ground, their riders cut down by the unyielding Parthas. The dust settled, a sea of bodies stretched out before them, their armor dented and broken. The elephants, once proud and mighty, now lay still upon the earth, their trunks shattered and their housings torn asunder. Arjuna's shafts had cut through the Samsaptakas like a scythe through grain. Krishna watched in awe as Arjuna stood victorious amidst the carnage. His eyes shone with admiration for his. The sun beat down on the battlefield as Arjuna, accompanied by his charioteer Krishna, urged their white steeds forward towards the divisions of Drona, a formidable warrior and teacher of the Kuras. As they approached Suzaman and his brothers, eager for battle, followed closely behind, challenging Arjuna to engage the Marjana, turned to Krishna, his voice filled with concern although of unfading glory. This Suzarman here with his brothers challengeth me to battle, O slayer of foes. Our host again is broken by Drona. Towards the north, in consequence of these Samsatakis, my heart wavers today as to whether I should do this or that. Krishna listened attentively. His expression, a mask of calmness. Arjuna pondered his options. He knew what he had to do. He pierced Suzarman with 7 swift arrows, cutting off both his bow and standard with 2 sharp ones. The brothers of the Trigarta king were quickly dispatched to Yamazabad. Their fate sealed by Arjuna's unyielding aim. Suzarman enraged hurled a dart made wholly of iron at Arjuna, but the latter cut it down with 3 swift arrows. He then deflected